Hello there! Welcome back to Charles Circle, and welcome back to Captain of Industry. Last time, we stood up an entire industry, from gold mining all the way through to server production, and that allowed us to stand up our first data center. We'll need to scale our microchip and electronics 3 production, for sure, in the future, but it's sufficient for our purposes so far. That's already allowed us to move past mainframe computers, freeing up a ton of workers, electricity, and most importantly, space. So we'll keep expanding our data center as supplies allow, but that'll happen in the background while we pivot our focus elsewhere. And where is elsewhere? Well, there are two decently sized projects on the horizon for us right now. One is aluminum, which we've unlocked a while ago, and if we continue to research, will eventually lead us down the path to the space station. The other is the next and final research lab upgrade, which will allow us to break into the very endgame technology set. If we really wanted to, we absolutely could set up aluminum right now. The issue, though, is that to actually use it for anything, we need a couple other things in place. What do you use aluminum for? Well, if you pull up the recipe, you'll see that we use aluminum for these composite panels, this chemical fuel, solar cells, and consumer electronics. These three are essentially pieces that go into the space station. And consumer electronics is something that we can provide to our POPs in the settlement for Unity, same as we do with household appliances and goods. The thing is, that tech is locked behind our research lab upgrades, right? So we will not be able to use our consumer electronics, use our aluminum for consumer electronics until we go through that path anyways, right? The other thing is that the rocket assembly and launch, as well as the space station itself, this all requires us to be able to run pretty continuously to keep supplying our space station project. And as you might notice, the items that go into that all require steel, and there's a pretty good chunk of steel required for the launch pad itself, along with each rocket. These composite panels are required in high supply, and again, that's going to require some steel. As well as this assembly depot will also need a bunch of vehicle parts 3, where we are currently running a little bit low because no parts 2, because no parts 1, because no mechanical parts, because no steel, right? The same thing is absolutely true of upgrading to the Research Lab 4. If we really wanted to, we could slowly churn out what we need to get there. It's a decent amount of electronics 3. We don't make a ton, but we could do that. It's no problem, really, and we could scale up a little bit further if we wanted. But again, our lab equipment supply, rather, is a little bit spotty because our steel is a little bit spotty. And we are able to support our existing lab's production requirements in bursts, right? We have enough here for now, but we'll have to double the throughput in order to upgrade and run continuously at the next level of labs as well. And that means doubling our production, which means doubling our consumption, again, of steel. So why is steel spotty, right? We're out here, we got nothing really piled up in our production areas. Well, not a ton in the way of iron ore, right? It really comes down to two things, and the first is partly just that our economy has continued to grow since we added our last extra set of capacity of steel. And really, steel is a foundational pillar of our economy, and if you wanted to find a proxy for our overall economic development in the game, you could do a lot worse than steel as a marker of that, right? So we've simply grown and we need and use more steel. On the other hand, though, yeah, the ore supply, not great, right? And this is because mining is fundamentally a pretty spotty supply in general, right? If you're in the thick of a vein, the ore comes fast and steady, and that's wonderful. But if you're scraping away a bunch of rock just to get it, what's little bit is left in certain areas of the mine, then it slows to a trickle. Additionally, if you hypothetically accidentally undermine your ore sorter and have to rebuild it, that can also cause a temporary disruption to supply, hypothetically. And when you need to make a full transition when one mine runs out, as this one will in the not too distant future, that's also disruptive to supply. The impact of having a boom and bust ore supply is magnified the higher the throughput of your entire industry. Now, you know what hasn't been spotty in forever? Wood supply. Right? Because we've been importing that using a contract. That contract never runs out. You never have to worry about moving mines, although of course with trees we're talking about, forest deposits, I suppose. But as long as we can supply this corresponding export, we will always have as much as we need. The throughput of a contract scales with your need seamlessly and doesn't have weird disruptions over time. Of course, there's the maximum throughput that a single massive cargo ship can handle, but we're not pushing up against that quite yet. So what we should do is we should set up an iron ore contract. Hell, we should set up a couple different contracts, but let's start with iron ore. Now, to be clear, this doesn't mean we're going to stop mining, right? Similarly to how we transitioned from blast furnace 2s when we unlocked arc furnace 2, right? We didn't delete these. They still serve an important purpose in our base. But going forward, and starting right now, any new capacity we need to build, as we did over here with arc furnace 2s, we'll build off of the new source. So meaning off of our contract or supply. This will mean that at least a solid fraction of our supply will be steady, giving us a strong baseline to go off of. Another reasonable comparison here is that we commit to a pretty decent chunk of baseline power production in our nuclear reactor, but we have still our variable coal consumption that'll allow us to absorb spikes. So, let's go ahead and get started on this. So where are we going to do this, right? Of course, because we're importing, we're going to have to do this on a coastline. And we're making steel, and steel goes into everything in our downtown manufacturing area. Of course, we don't exactly have much in the way of free space down here, so we're probably going to have to push off to one of two areas. Out here, still relatively close, you can run a truck, or out here. Similarly, by the time you finish the factory, you could run a truck from here. It's not super far either. The reason I don't want to do it out here is I don't think we're quite done filling in this area yet. I think it'll be great once we, have other coastlines to put our docks down on, but I just don't think this is ready yet. Same thing out here. We'll probably use this as well, but we still have more work to do filling in. We haven't even really finished filling in this coastline, although that's on the way and should happen soon. So I think we need to place a little bit of steel capacity out here. This will also allow us to leverage some of the overbuilt infrastructure that we put down for our gold in the last episode, right? We made an entire exhaust scrubber and CO2 absorption into graphite setup out here. It's totally overkill for the very little bits of exhaust that come out of the gold furnace. Every 300 years, this thing goes off once. So that means it has a lot of capacity to absorb the additional exhaust that we will be producing coming out of even our arc furnace 2 setup, right? So if you look out here, this place requires its own dedicated exhaust scrubber. We basically already have one, is my point, right next to where we're thinking about building anyway. And this has so much capacity that you might as well consider it essentially unused. So I think what we'll do is place some capacity down here using a similar setup here as we have for the uranium import. We'll make sure that we can still send trucks up and down this waterfront throughfare. And then we'll have to crush it. As we know, the first thing you do with iron ore is you crush it, and then we'll put it into a very similar setup to what we have over here already. I think we're gonna do one, I don't know if it's gonna be, if it's that smart, but it's gonna be kind of interesting. One change here, other than the scale, we'll probably double this, is how we provide oxygen for our oxygen furnaces. We've been doing this with air separators since the very beginning of the game. We haven't unlocked this third super steam recipe, but we recently unlocked electrolyzer 2. And compared to electrolyzer 1, it actually produces oxygen in pretty decent volumes. And it does so from pretty small amounts of water. Plus, it produces hydrogen, which is something that we kind of struggle for around the base and wouldn't mind having an extra supply. The downside, well, it uses 4x power compared to a typical electrolyzer 2. How much is that? Well, it's not a little bit. 4 times 1.1, so 4.5 megawatts for one of these, and we would need 5 of these in order to run a new double of this setup. So, you know, that's roughly 10% of our power capacity, but we're really not using much of it. Why wouldn't we? I'm gonna try it out. If it ends up being terrible, we'll not use it. We can always slap these air separators back in somewhere else, no problem. But I wouldn't mind a little bit of supplemental hydrogen, and we're gonna be doing it by the coast anyway. So, other than that, you know the drill by now on a steel setup. So, I'm gonna get after it. Talk soon. Hey folks, Editor Me here. I'm going to truncate the time-lapse on this build and get you right to the tour at the end. I do generally like time-lapsing builds, but even at the typical 5x speed I use, this one was over 10 minutes, and it's just steel. A build you've seen a couple times, a couple different ways by now. So, out of respect for your time, I'm going to cut to the end of the build here now. Alright, I'm sure I forgot something, but I think this is right. So let's find out. We'll jumpstart with a little bit of water here, but ultimately the water is going to be run from the seawater pumps here and the thermal desalinators here. They will take all of the steam low that comes out from all 8 of these arc furnace 2s. So that 48 should come in here 2 times in a thermal desalinator, should produce 144 water. That ought to be enough for everything we need, and we'll just dump the brine over here. Of course, we'll have to bring in via cargo ship the iron ore, which we will be trading for, by the way, using this vehicle parts 2 export. Looks like a large number, but hey, that's a much larger number. Now we still need to upgrade on the world map, and I think that that's why it's not letting us pick something here yet, but it should be a loose cargo, and then ultimately this will be our vehicle parts 2 to run that. Ore comes in here, gets crushed. I actually left, and this is a bit of a look ahead, I left an accessible loose storage here for crushed iron ore. 1, to add a buffer, but 2, because there's a little bit that'll come out of the aluminum process. Kind of an interesting byproduct. So we'll have it be able to come over here. The water also over here in too many electrolyzers now will send hydrogen out here as a helpful byproduct, but mostly send oxygen into the oxygen furnace row, which is this second one. Of course, that skips right over the arc furnace 2 row, which takes, in addition, this graphite and some limestone, which we cannibalized by pulling over from here. This might end up being a throughput issue. We'll see. If that's the case, we'll get a larger storage somewhere and reroute, but I think we'll be okay. We're gonna find out. Similarly, we made use of the slag export over here. Same thing, it might be a throughput issue, we'll find out, but we'll collect the slag out of this one as well. Finally, all of the exhaust runs out and around and into this scrubber. Okay. I think that's everything, right? These are all the pieces that we had to talk through. The water, I suppose, just to finish, continues around this way as well. Oh, and I left space for a dock over here in case we ever want to import or trade for a gold ore as well. But I thought that would be worth, we don't really need this here, but would be worth keeping some space for there in case in the future we want to do that. So I think we'll just go ahead and build everything. Now, a couple things have to happen right as we unpause here. I mean, let's unpause. It doesn't have to be right as we unpause, but we don't have enough cargo ships for that. We're already using all 4 that we've already gotten, but neat trick. We can, in the quick trades, infinitely just trade for some construction parts 3, a cargo ship, and there we go. Now that'll come in here. We do also, however, need to get to the correct village. I believe I set this in motion before the camera got going, but here we are. It should be this settlement. We need to get it up to 2. And I believe, beautiful. We are currently attempting to load it. This is all just some very low level construction parts, frankly stuff we could have been doing in the background this entire time if I had been keeping that ball up in the air, but I hadn't. So be it, no problem. While that's all going, we can also, let's see, what else do we want to do? Well, in order to keep this going, we actually need to pause our server production because it's eating all of our electronics 3. So maybe we'll do that real quick. We'll say, hang on a tick. We'll have some servers we can definitely use after that, but let's accumulate some electronics 3 to make this instead. We'll even call it urgent. Neat. Okay. Other things we can do, I was just sort of poking around the base. We have some excess biomass here. This is actually a very good problem to have. Part of it is we have expanded our population, and so we're generating more. The other part of it is we actually aren't taking all that much power right now. We have these on auto balance, so they spin up every once in a while, and they take, of course, still biomass over coal power. But our power just hasn't come up very high over the base load that we're producing, the 120 that we're producing over here in the nuclear reactor, which is what, I guess, roughly here-ish. So we spike every once in a while. You can see it's happening, but it's not consistent enough to eat up all of our biomass, essentially. So we can do 2 things. One, we can increase that buffer by adding that priority optionality out here for our other backups as well. It's not a long-term solve, but it is helpful and avoids coal, I suppose. The other thing we can do is simply say, well, what else can you do with biomass? You can turn it into compost and toss it. And I'm not so worried right now about power that I want to save the buffer of biomass. It's just not that important, frankly, of a resource. So I think I'll probably set up something like that real quick over here, but we'll try to prioritize it so that it's only when there's excess here, which will mean, because there's no way to interact with sort of the priority here, we will have to do this with a storage here. And we'll say biomass, keep empty, and only output to the belts if it's going to be a problem soon, right? So we're going to try to keep this empty generally, but if there's nowhere else to put biomass, fine, we'll output it over here to a mixer. This mixer will very simply just turn it into compost, which we're comfortable tossing. Great. So that's pretty much that. Go ahead and build all of it. Similarly, our recyclables are backing up a bit, and this is particularly true over here when we are also running our research labs, which we aren't right now. So this should take care of itself, but I have asked our priority to go up so that we are taking by truck excess over here to the other recycling plant that we have, which should have some additional capacity. It's not nearly as jammed up. If you look at the stats, right, we have 2 recycling plants that should be able to handle 144 each, and we're good there. It's just about allocating it properly, right? So I think we'll be okay there. And this is our sand mine. Needs a little bit more instruction, sure. You know what we're going to do over here actually is set up a quartz processing, which will also turn into sand, right? But should give us the ability to go into this area a little bit more, because quartz we simply grind into sand. So we'll get a crusher. Goodness. Here. And you will see that you can take this quartz, you can crush it, then you have quartz crushed, and then you can take that quartz crushed, crush it again, and you get sand. And we'll do this in back-to-back crushers here, I suppose. I don't think it's going to be so high throughput that we need a second one of these, but we'll leave space just in case. Why not? But here's this. Actually, I suppose we'll go one back, forward, quartz. Maybe we'll say no quartz allowed in here so that we don't have to worry about crossing over our belts. We'll just do this. Hopefully that helps. All right, and checking in over here, we are making broad progress. We'll let our trucks keep going on that. We don't have the Unity to really boost it much ourselves, but let's make sure that we haven't missed any little lifts or anything everywhere. I think we'll be okay. Very good. Let the speed run. I'm going to hang on research right now just because steel is an issue and we make that worse by continuously consuming lab equipment. So we'll pause on that for now. So this is good to see our copper is in fact catching up post our mining transition. This is definitely in the hitting the sweet spot of an ore vein stage of things. So that is good to see here for sure. Our other mine is going through the last little bits here. We will keep upgrading all of these as our vehicle parts supply allows. Same thing over here, this is wrapping up. We'll have to think about how we want to get copper and sand into this area in the future. When these are gone, it's going to be harder, I think, to run large trains in through here. So we might even just let haul trucks handle it. It's not that high of volume, honestly. Most of our copper is actually made and then immediately consumed out here. This is just for electronics, really. And same thing here with the glass. This is definitely overbuilt. So let's see. The other thing we'll do, we started using all of our workers again. Honestly, these bonuses are still not incredibly impressive. I think we scale that back a bit, which is not the end of the world. Something else we can do, it's a bit of a follow-up from last time, I suppose. We made gold. We could set up luxury good production. Let's at least see how much our people would need, or, well, I guess want. It's luxury goods. 20.6. Okay. One of these makes 16, so we would need 2. It's not terrible. I think we could probably pull that off if we wanted to. Would be like this and maybe more in the future, but we could wait. Of course, what we would need to make that happen, though, is the imported good that we would have to get from another contract. So we'll wait on that for now, but it's good to start thinking about that. Similarly, this is probably something else we can do with a contract. We were using this for our coal mine import. We've paused that. We make enough coal, but it's not getting down here very well from our train. And we have all of this excess sulfur. I would love to finally get to use this sulfur for coal. My goodness, where is it? Here it is. It was right here the whole time. This sulfur for coal trade. Once we are able to upgrade the villages. The other thing we can do in the meanwhile, we do need 2 copies of this incineration plant. The one boosted is fine, but I'd rather take the Unity back, so I am going to make a second copy here real quick. I'll probably have to move this over so that we don't take up too much of the roadway. So let's dive in and do that real quick. And yep, all right, that should do it here. I suppose it'll be covered, but I'd rather pave just for good measure as well. And there we go. That should help our trash capacity for quite some time. How are we doing over here? Pretty good, pretty good. Yeah, only the spots where we explicitly need steel still struggling, but that's okay. All right, here we go. We've got water on its way, maybe some already delivered out into pipes. We'll definitely need a little bit of it for sure because we are going to have to get through the steam before we can run that. And we don't yet have our contract. Pausing quickly here. Now we need to donate again for slightly less, or slightly more rather, excuse me. Yeah, it's the second one. Great. So let's load the ship, bring the ship home, and that'll be ready in just a moment. How's Electronics 3 production going? I mean, the good news is we seem to be keeping up on maintenance, but that's pretty much it. Making 3. We're definitely not using 50% of this, so we should still be keeping up in the longer run as long as all of this is still going, and it is. Good. Good to see that. Done loading cargo for settlement. Send it. Ooh, yeah, that is quite a bit there, isn't it? All right, and our Unity is tanking. What are we missing? Household goods, probably steel. Indeed. Are you mad because you're full on trash? Indeed. That is... Yep. There we go, exhaust. Clear that out, catch on up. I believe we have it unlocked now, and there it is. The other one, I think, should be ready finally here. Donation-wise is the sulfur trade. And yeah, there we go. Here's sulfur for coal. In the meanwhile, our second data center has arrived. We'll get our first rack up and running there. Should bring us up closer to 200. Look at that. Here it is. Let's let her rip. Good. It looks like we have everything we need for our arc furnaces to work. Let's see if we can keep up with throughput. Limestone might be a problem. We're gonna find out. It sure is taking power. That is a thing that it's gonna do. Makes sense. No problem. We'll spin up and adjust in a moment, I'm sure. All right. Sulfur's getting loaded up. And look at that. Steel's rolling off. Presses. And that is very good. We desperately need that. Yeah, it's taking a lot of electricity, but this hydrogen is it's a pretty decent supply. I'm happy to see that. I'm actually a little bit worried we're gonna have trouble making use of it, even. But if that's the case, we'll just start moving some of our cargo ships over to it. Starting with this one. Let's see how it goes. I think we should have brilliant, quite a few more servers. Love to see that. Not quite ready to turn the internet on for everyone, but we're getting closer. That is officially it for this sand mine. Time now, I think, to fill it in. This copper mine's not far off either, frankly. Well, this whole process seems to be humming along pretty well. I'm pretty pleased with it, I think. The hydrogen's a nice little bonus. definitely happy we're getting a little bit more of that out to the base. And it's another spot where we get to consume some graphite, so we're happy about that too. Try to get back on the other side of consuming these down a bit. So that's a pretty solid start here. And we are slowly but surely getting ourselves out of steel debt here. In fact, just for the little dopamine hit, let's go ahead and boop, pay one of those off. Not too bad at all. And once we're done paying that all back down, we'll start to accumulate, which is obviously ultimately the goal. So that's very good. In the meanwhile, of course, this all still continues to operate over here. This is still part of it. It's a little hit or miss, but more hit than miss lately as far as keeping up on the iron ore, which is good. Very good to see. I think it's not even a downside, it's just the cost of this arrangement is, yeah, we put down 8 arc furnaces, which at 6 megawatts each is roughly 50 of our power capacity, and you can definitely see that spike here in the last few years compared to where we had been in the trough there. So it's not a problem, but it's definitely something we're going through more coal again as a result, because this is running pretty much continuously. Frankly, just about everywhere in the base is. This can spin up or down depending, but it's also the spot that has the least consistent coal access. So we've kind of traded all of our excess sulfur. This creeps up slowly but surely, and eventually it will trigger another coal run, but it's working for now. I think we'll take it. We're also starting to accumulate a little bit of fertilizer, which is not so bad. Happy to be sending that over by train as well. Just because our refinery is running at a more full, smooth speed. I think that's probably partly our farms are backing up a bit, which is giving us more fuel gas, which is good. But I also do think that, being able to provide the hydrogen from out here means that we have sort of a relative excess of other products coming out of our refinery based on how this all gets balanced. So pretty good start, I would say, here to our contract economy work. Before we add any additional contracts, though, we should probably fix our maintenance 3, which means we need to increase our microchip production so that we can improve our production of electronics 3. So let's, I don't know, I guess maybe quickly quadruple this. I think we can pull that off. Let's dive in. All right, so I think this works. Basically just took the same thing and just matrixed it a little bit further, right? So our C to A stage, or our 0 to A stage, is here, and it's the same sort of cycling back loop all the way around. That's the same all the way across here, so that's just acid and water. Here, same thing, but the copper plastic loop, the B to C, is this middle row, and we're sending the copper here and the plastic from here. And then same thing out here, we add gold in the last row. The only thing that's a little bit, we're gonna find out, we're just gonna cycle everything but microchips, which we'll pass off here. Based on this input balancer, we're prioritizing finishing, goods that have not yet been completed, but this is actually the only machine that's going to have silicon wafers as an input. Now, that shouldn't matter once we get up to speed, because all of the, in progress goods should probably end up cycling through here first. But if it ends up being a problem, we'll revisit it. We could prioritize the silicon recipe up top, but I think generally this should take care of itself. But we're gonna find out. So let's build it all and see if that helps. The other concern, I don't know if it's a concern, the other question I have is whether or not our acid production is going to be sufficient here. And I think at least to get started, we're going to boost it. Because when this whole setup is going at top speed, right, we use acid all the way out here even to make glass mix, right? So we might need a second acid mixer. That'll be fine. Same question with water. We'll find out, but I think we should be okay. We'll come back and check on this in a moment. The other thing, as I look actually, at our steel supply, I think we're just going to do it to be done with it, is let's pay off the last of this debt. Brilliant. So steel is really coming along here, which you love to see. The other thing we can do from a contracts perspective is get our imported goods up and running, right? So this luxury goods module tells us that our settlement demand is about 21, which is 1.25-ish of these. We'll build a second one, obviously, but that means that we need to get ourselves about 15 imported goods per minute, and it'll cost us about 5 gold per minute. So where are we going to get our imported goods from? Let's take a look at contracts, right? As a reminder, this has to be imported. We don't yet make diamonds. We do make vehicle parts, and that's pretty much it, right? Now, our vehicle parts production is a little bit, we're hanging in there. I did boost it to try to speed up a little bit, so I think we can handle it, but we may have to reinforce this production if we're continuing to export it a bunch. So let's keep an eye on it. Now, that said, we don't need this in hugely high volumes. As we just said, we need all of, like 15 of these per minute. So I'm wondering, as I sort of look around where we would want to put this, we're pretty full up everywhere that's close to this manufacturing area. And this, as a reminder, is saved for gold ore import in the future. Kind of wondering if a smaller cargo dock might fit here. Probably doesn't, but maybe we could remove the trading dock. I do see a clear blue cone there, so I think we're going to do that. Obviously, we're going to need this again somewhere else, but we can't rebuild it until this one is gone. And then, let's get a nice small cargo dock here. I kind of feel like we can't get even a 6, right? Yeah, we're going to have bad overlap there, but I think we can do a 4. Good. And of course, we'll need modules. And here, since we're exporting unit goods and receiving unit goods back, we can just do 4 of these. Tremendous. I think I'm looking at our hydrogen production. I don't know if we're going to make another hydrogen boat quite yet. I think we'll use our same heavy oil fuel for now, but let's keep an eye on this. Easy to change. They're all fluid unit modules, so. And we'll need to grab the contract itself, of course. Where are you? Vehicle parts. There we go. So there's that. And now we can assign here. Okay. So we are exporting vehicle parts and then importing back a good ratio, hopefully, of imported goods. Of course, I suppose we should tell all of these that they are accessible by truck. And we'll roll from there. Last thing we'll need is another cargo ship, which, as a reminder, there aren't any left on the map. What we do from now on is just, well, as soon as we rebuild our trading dock, we quick trade. So let's do that. And we can just fit it back in here. That's great. I don't think it's going to break everything, but let's find out. And of course, the most important part is fixing that. Brilliant. There's a trading dock. There's a cargo ship. Done. So that'll happen, and then of course we are going to need to construct all of this, but that is fine. So we'll say all of our imported goods go here. And then actually, now that I think about it, we need to leave room for gold as well. So let's do that. There you go. We'll call this gold. And this will be a flat lift situation. And then output goes here. We'll let this be its own storage buffer. I don't think we need to worry about that too much ourselves. We can still drive through here. Yes, we can. All right. Let her rip. All right, checking in over here. Yeah, this seems to be working. Definitely not at top speed quite yet, but we're getting there. It's going to take a moment for sure. It's also going to increase our, well, obviously power needs, but compute needs as well when it is going. I think we'll be okay in the meanwhile. All right, good. Maintenance 3 is catching up. Because microchips are catching up, and so therefore electronics 3 is catching up. So that's good. We'll take that. Probably can even continue making servers. And in fact, let's go install more racks. And all right, I think because we're actually piling up some microchips here, we're still not fully at speed. These aren't all continuously working, but we're getting closer. I think it's time to add another one of these guys. Or maybe we should sort of change how we do this production in the first place. This will also definitely not be sufficient for forever, but it'll work for now. Acid production seems like it's holding up. Probably kill that boost. We'll keep an eye on that as well. All right, here's what we're gonna do. I think we're gonna have this first row only handle these initial, or this first recipe. This should seed the others, I think, a little bit faster. I do think eventually this setup would have gotten where we needed it to, but I'd rather just get there faster. Getting real tired of the intermittent power spikes when our coal runs out down here. I don't mind if coal runs out for this process. We clearly have a stockpile of electronics, but we're gonna keep this manually backed up over here. Hopefully that should remove these little blinking red bars every once in a while. The issue is that our coal train, like we have enough coal, it's sitting up here, but the issue is that our coal train throughput for getting down here isn't enough even to complement our sulfur export, because we can't get either a large train back here or it causes train traffic, and we can't get multiple trains back here or it causes train traffic. So this is just, it's just not set up for the coal throughput that we're asking for over here. So we need to supplement it from the other end. And like I said, I only really care about the power. It was just sort of, I suppose, a design flaw to place the power at the very end, given the implicit priority that that works off of. But no problem with a couple of our big dump trucks. That should not be an issue to supply. Yeah, here we go. I think we are finally, yep, supplying luxury goods. And isn't that nice? Here it is. Couple extra Unity. We'll certainly take it. No complaints there. I've also updated the toolbar on the right, since it is was wildly out of date as far as what we were bothering to keep track of. I removed all the crops because it's too much, and it'll let us know if we're starving. But everything else has been updated. We've got nuclear, we've added more electronics. I've sort of removed old construction parts, stuff that we don't care about. The rest of it's still structurally about the same. But yeah, that's how I even noticed, right? We are doing good over here. That should be enough imported goods for quite some time. Which is nice, because we are slowly but surely catching up on what we need for exports over here. And we're certainly keeping up on the important stuff, which is the steel, for sure. Love to see that. So that's more servers, so maybe we increase the racks. Very good. We're not all the way there yet, but we're getting closer every time. And it does seem like with these two boosted, we are able to consume more or less all of the microchips, which is great, and it's obviously barely putting a dent in our electronics too, so all good there as well. We'll probably pause on these at some point so that we can build the next data center, which does require some stockpiled electronics 3. That's all right. We'll get to that when we get to that. And there we go. That's this rack full. Go ahead and build another. And we will temporarily... No, we're actually accumulating them. Very good. All right, so then we'll let them keep building servers so that we can get this up to speed faster. We will need another cooling setup. All right, I think what we're gonna do actually is change this contract. We're actually not accumulating as much sulfur now that we've sort of spent down the last bits that we had saved up over here. And in fact, of course, we need to tidy that up, my goodness. I think what we're gonna do instead, I still want to be bringing in a little bit of extra coal, but in fact I want to do it better, which is to say we should pick up one of these other contracts instead. This is a great ratio, vehicle parts 3, but right now we're barely keeping up with our export needs for vehicle parts 2, and in fact have completely stopped upgrading vehicles, so I don't know that I want to stress that supply chain any further. We could do lab equipment. It's not an incredible ratio for how expensive this is, frankly. This is surprisingly cheap, and in fact, in some games I used this earlier on. This is right, cement is just limestone and some fuel gas, which is what we produce it off of. So I think this is a fine option. The other one is household goods, and this is, you know, kind of a worse ratio and requires a little bit more in the way of advanced goods. So I actually think what we're going to do is this cement contract. And let's say trucks can't even export from here. We want this to go directly into this system. I think that feels right. And there it goes. I'll be back in a bit with some coal. Hopefully that helps keep this a little bit more regular. And we're back, and we're unloading. And we're already off again. That is allowing this to get moving again, which is good because we were completely out of silicon poly, which has in fact stopped our microchip production, which is not what we want. I think we'll extend this storage just given how important this is about to be for our economy. Not enough room for one of these, but it'll be helpful, I think, to have a second unit storage here for sure. Of course, there's also, right, there's a built-in buffer of pretty significant size, right, in the ships themselves, and that's wonderful, but it would be good to also have something here. All right, and then finally, I think it's time to change this to an export as well. This will allow us to stop using all of our world mines, which is pretty great because we were using 3 of these. That was quite a few people, quite a lot of unity, and this is more sustainable, right? I mean, those are not going to last forever. It's good to have these here. We have access to them still, but they were already getting a chunk taken out of them. So this will be more reliable going forward, as long as we can keep up on these. Decently sized caveat, I know, but I think we'll be okay. This one we are going to keep a specific buffer here for it as well. And we'll make sure that we feel good about how much or how safe we're being about our oil supply, because that is going to be significant, no question. So as soon as this unloads, and the ship is very nearly done right now, we will change the proper module, and then this should be ready to go too. Checking on the old nuclear power plant over here, we are almost halfway to our spent MOX limit on this storage, but we are otherwise holding steady over here. Fission product has a lot more room, and we are, of course, retiring waste as we can coming out of this storage too. We have vehicle parts flowing onto the boat, and hopefully pretty soon we'll end up with oil coming back, which will be good because, oops, we're running low. You know what I was just thinking to myself is there is still an oil patch out here, and it's not a huge one either. I mean, it looks visually large, but it's only about 3 times as much as the little guy out here. So I thought, why not, while we're on the topic of changing our oil sources, there's no reason not to bring this back into play so that the island is completely drained. All right, time to start racking up the 3rd data center. And we do generally seem to be keeping up here. Even if we have to boost this like long term, this takes us 2 Unity and it won't take us the whole amount because this does keep stockpiling even though we're expanding. This 2 Unity is still cheaper than all of the Unity we were spending out here, right? And one of these, and we had 3 of them, we were spending north of 1 already. So it's already more efficient. Of course, it takes a little bit of Unity to maintain a contract, and that's a fair point, but it's still less. It is at worst net even, but I think it's actually a small but meaningful gain. So we'll certainly take that. And with that, we're starting intermittently to be able to provide internet, which is pretty cool. It's lowest priority. We want everything else to work before we give the internet to people, but, see, right? We're getting it here and there. So we'll smooth it out soon, but that's a very good sign. That's it, no more copper in this area. And then, I actually think, there we go. That should do it. I think we are now going to be able to consistently provide the internet. Of course, immediately, the moment I say that. Okay, now I feel safe saying it. We provide 500 teraflops. That feels pretty good. This is working more consistently. And I believe, yeah, as soon as this has a month to tick over, we should be getting Unity for that as well. The fact that we have finished up out here also means we can kind of clean up this area. And in fact, now that we no longer need this station here, we don't need this turnaround loop, as long as we take this motion like so, we can in fact delete this whole chunk. We'll let our trucks take care of that at their leisure. We're not in a rush. Similarly, you can go. And in fact, I think we can change these all to slag now, which should make these trains turnarounds a little bit faster. So we'll take that. Well, all right. I gotta say, this has been a pretty good transition for us into contracts. As I look at it, we've exported all of our excess sulfur, right? And now we are using cement, bringing in a decent amount of coal here. That's keeping this full enough. That, plus the fact that all of our oil now comes from contracts, is pretty great, honestly. We're not using the world mines anymore. We don't have to worry about any of that. We also set up the imported goods that allow us to provide, when our electricity isn't sketchy, enough luxury goods for a bit more Unity. We've still been able to keep up on the wood and household appliances trade that we've been doing, and the same is true out here. We've been able to keep up with all of the extra steel that we're asking our base to provide. That's pretty good. I will definitely take that. Now we just have to figure out our power situation, because we are definitely pushing on the edge of it again. Maybe it's time for another nuclear plant, or just some expanded coal, since we're bringing more in. We'll figure it out in relatively short order. But I think this is pretty good, and it's definitely good enough for today. So I'm going to call it here for an episode. But if you enjoyed yourself, of course, feel free to stop by again for the next one and see what we get up to. A few different directions we can go. We'll see what we decide when it's time for the next one. And hey, if you've watched this far, you are probably the type of person, unless you're watching this far into the future, who may have noticed that the delivery schedule of these episodes has slowed down a little bit the last couple of weeks. Don't worry, still doing it, still putting them out as quickly as I can. A couple things have popped up personally and professionally for me the last couple of weeks, but all is well, and I am anticipating being able to keep these going at a decent pace. So we'll play around with some other ideas if we need to. I sort of think the other part of this is late into a playthrough. There's a good amount that you have to cut out just because you have to let the base run for a minute, and it's just not very good content, and I respect your time too much to leave that in. So it takes a little bit longer to make an episode. But we could, while I was, say, running the base and sort of letting all of our stockpiles charge up and whatnot, I could do that on live or something and connect with people there, while also maybe making some aesthetic changes and all of that. So if that's something you're interested in or would watch, certainly let me know. But I think otherwise we'll make sure that we're at least getting one of these out a week, and I'm ideally aiming for 2, even if the halcyon days of a few weeks ago of getting 3 out every week are maybe on pause for a minute. But we'll keep them coming. No problem, no worries. Anyways, thank you again, as always. I appreciate you stopping by, and I hope that it's been fun for you. But we'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.